My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
And community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here of Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. Hope your week is going well. We have been doing some amazing stuff here at the Raspy Dispatcher. All of our socials are really blowing up this month. It's so fun to watch. Our TikTok has just surpassed 2,000 followers, and we just put out a reel talking about one of our sponsors, text-to-translation software, and just seeing the feedback that comes on these social media pages where people, dispatchers included, are learning about the things that we have available to us, and most importantly, not available to all of us. So we need to educate the public on the realities that our centers are dealing with. And it's been so fun watching us build these communities across all these different social media platforms. YouTube, we just passed 6,000 subscribers on YouTube. Facebook, Instagram as well are up in the 4,000 and 5,000 followers. So just thank you all so much for helping me build these awesome communities where dispatchers, current, former, and aspiring, can come together, learn from one another, and support each other. And before we get into our episode, let's hear from our sponsors. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology. Revolutionizing how we handle emergencies, Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. As always, make sure to go check out our sponsors because they are doing amazing work. Now, for today's episode, we are going to be chatting with a dispatcher with over 9 years of experience doing police, fire, and EMS, and they are currently working with their local community college, 911 Dispatch Academy, as their unofficial program coordinator. My guest today, Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Well, you did today. You were teaching folks, CPR before this, just,
Yes.
constantly doing the thing.
Trying really hard, educate the students.
Well, how did you get into public safety? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So again, I am Jessica. I got into public safety by way of the military. I was in the Army as military police for 8 years. I medically retired in 2014, and I started to think, what am I going to do next? Shortly before I got out of the military, I took a class at Bell County Communications, the active shooter class. And so the director at the time, he decided to give us a tour of the building, a tour of dispatch. And, being kind of naive, we know 911 exists, but you don't necessarily think of it as a career. So when I actually saw it, I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing when I get out the Army. Because at that time, I was already taking non-emergency calls. I was the desk sergeant at Fort Hood. So I was like, I can answer phones. So that's how I'll transition. And so that is how I got into 911.
Awesome. And when you did make that leap, did you feel prepared? Did you feel blindsided? Like, what was that transition like for you?
I think the transition was pretty easy for me as far as the distress and the type of environment being in the military. Now there were calls where I do remember just freezing and let my trainer take over just because it was something new and it was a different dynamic. But
Mhm.
overall, I think I did have a pretty smooth transition into being an emergency telecommunicator.
Mm. And when you first started, what was technology like? Were you guys operating, on a CAD system, or was it still kind
Oh
of
no.
something out of the non-technology era?
Oh no, it was full of technology. I started in 2015, so there were CADs, there were radios. We had in Texas, the TCIC, the terminal stations like that. So it was full technology. I wasn't alive. I'm just kidding, not alive, but I wasn't around for when it wasn't technology based like it is now. So that is what I know.
Mhm.
I can do it manually, but I do
Mhm.
definitely we all prefer technology.
Yeah, no, I try to avoid manual mode in my
Mhm.
career.
Yes.
Every chance I get, I think I've only actually had to go full manual mode for like 3 times so far.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
knock
Try
on
to
all
avoid
wood.
it.
Do you remember any, first calls or early calls for service when you were just getting into this line of work?
Yeah, I remember several. A lot of them were those moments where I was with a trainee or trainer, I'm sorry, and kind of was like, "What is going on?" and let my trainer take over. I think one of my first calls, if I'm not mistaken, was a suicidal caller. That call I remember distinctly because that's where I learned the difference between sympathy and empathy. I
Mhm.
took the call, kind of froze. My trainer took over and sympathized with the caller. And then it was like the caller immediately, you don't know what I'm going through, kind of thing. So it was like, okay, so now I have to pay attention to how I talk to the callers. I do remember CPR to this day, 9 years later. I do not like CPR calls. I think I'm pretty good, but I do not like them
Yeah.
where it was a child and I thought the parent was doing CPR with the child. And the next day I come to work and my trainer is like, "Did you see the news?" And I'm like, "No." And the father who was supposed to be doing CPR was actually wanted now for, possibly killing the child. And so that was pretty hard because I thought he was actually doing it with me. So I think
Mhm.
I started with some pretty extreme calls initially. And I think that also helped with the transition of being able to take calls in general as a dispatcher.
Isn't that it's always so interesting in regards to, like, the level of calls that we're exposed to when we're exposed to them, because
Mhm.
it could be your very first call be
Mhm.
the call of your career, you know what I mean? Like, you never know when
Right.
you're gonna take that call, and that's why our training is just so unique in this line of work.
Mhm.
You're kinda once you're answering those lines, you're,
You
feet
go.
or you're going.
Go mode.
Um, and just this reality of we do talk to the suspects, quite often, and,
Mhm.
it's our job to gather as much information without really knowing they're the suspect at times, right? Like you said in
Right.
this example is you think this person is following instructions and going through, um, the directions and pre-arrival stuff, and it ends up being this whole other
Right.
situation.
Right. And you never think that. You never initially think, that you are talking to that suspect. In this particular case, like, he counted with me. I thought he was doing compressions. Like, everything seemed like it fit correctly with what we were doing, and it just wasn't. The child ended up passing away, and then they were looking for the father. So it was, like, definitely interesting.
Mhm. And then that also speaks to, like, did you hear the news? Like,
Yeah.
our follow-up is on Channel 5 the next
Right,
day,
right.
and yet you were the person on the phone, and
Right.
the delay in our closure or our knowledge of what's going on is just so real.
Yeah. Always, last to find out what's actually going on, first to take the call.
Mhm, exactly, Um, well, you currently work at the Houston Community College 911 Dispatch Academy,
Yes.
which I think is freaking awesome. So if you could tell us about this program and what you folks got going on over there.
Yeah, so we're in year 3. We are in our 4th and 5th academy at this time. I have 2 running concurrently, one in the daytime, one in the evening. We are a 10-week program. We initially begin training with dispatch and call taking, how to take calls, how to talk to callers, how to talk on the radio, just the very basics of dispatching, as we don't know what agencies our students would potentially go to. And, everything as far as specific training will be agency based. We do have CAD simulations to where they are able to practice data entry into their CADs. We have portable radios. Their CAD simulations also have an option to use their headphones for radio operations as well.
Mhm.
Um, and we just basically put them through it. A lot of scenarios, a lot of role playing. We're able to use these radios also to have multiple different things going on as if they were in a call center so that they can kind of feel that pressure, so to speak, so that when they get to their agencies, things are familiar. From that part of the academy, we then go to we are licensed in the state of Texas, so we then go into our TCOL licensing exam portion of the class where we focus on the material that the state requires for them to take their state license. We give them all the material they need. We still try to do a little bit of practical exercise in there to help retain, and then they go to take their state licensing exam.
Mhm.
From that point, then we move on to our TCIC and CIC certification. So our goal is for these students to go through the program and successfully complete their exam so that they come out with their license, their CPR certification, their TCIC certifications. That way, when they get to their agencies, they have a foundation versus not knowing anything at all.
Mm.
So that is what we do for 10 weeks.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so helpful. I mean, I can only imagine how helpful that is for these folks when they do get into training at their agencies
Mhm.
to just have experience talking on a radio. Like, I
Yeah.
remember the fear of knowing that, my voice is gonna go out for the masses to hear. I think the first thing I said on the radio was 10-4, and it was in a whisper, like
Yeah, yeah.
10-4. Like, that was it, and that was my big moment of that day,
So,
So
yeah,
just
we try to get them that exposure here because, of course, we can't teach specifics, but we get them that exposure, and that way they're still probably gonna be nervous at their agencies because now it's more live, but at
Mhm,
least it's familiar and
mhm.
not foreign. And so that's my biggest thing is to give them a foundation of what they do so that they can transition a little better than if they had no knowledge at all.
Yeah. And do you have relationships with like your local agencies where you're like getting feedback of
So
how they're transitioning in or
So, being that we are a new academy, like we are in Academy 4 and 5, but we've had really small classes because word of mouth, the Dispatch Academy idea is new. And
Mhm,
so it's foreign and people aren't really on board just yet about it because, who has a Dispatch Academy? So first couple academies were a little rough as far as putting that material out, a lot of school politics. We know how politics works, but we ended up getting everything together how we needed it to be. Um, Now, the biggest thing is we are licensed. And so that transition from the academy to agencies, it's something that I'm working on to be a lot quicker versus
mhm,
the sometimes 2 to 3 months, 4 months it can take to be hired on at an agency with backgrounds and fingerprints, things like that.
mhm,
However, I had an academy that graduated end of March this year.
mhm,
I did have one of those students. She is employed now with an agency, a local agency. She did begin in August. With this particular agency, there were talks in the beginning of us establishing this academy,
mhm,
but it just wasn't known. There were no results yet. They didn't know if they wanted to kind of put into us.
mhm,
Well, now we are back in conversation to possibly train their new hires
mm,
because my student that graduated and now is employed with them, she's excelling. She's going
mhm,
through training at a higher or faster rate than some of the other trainees because she is familiar with information. Something that I
Mhm.
do is I do keep in contact with all the students that have graduated to make sure that I'm pushing them to go get hired somewhere. If I
Mhm.
find out jobs that are hiring, I'm saying, "Hey, they're hiring," you know? And so I did speak with that student as well, just to keep up with her and see how her training was going, and she absolutely loved it, and she told me basically, like, without the foundation of the academy, she doesn't think she would be able to do it. So that made me
Mhm.
happy, and then her progress is also linking us to possibly, training these new hires at agencies,
Mhm.
and we're
Mhm.
hoping with that we can eventually expand.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like you guys are doing an amazing job, and it is something that is needed. And it's
Mhm.
just so funny, like you said, you're like, well, who has a dispatch
Yeah.
academy? It's like, why don't we have a dispatch academy, right?
Right.
Like, we put our officers through academy.
Mhm.
My agency, we kind of put on our own academy at my
Right.
first agency. And it's that acclimation point that we miss when we just put our folks right into the fire, and
Mhm.
which I get it, like, some departments are like, "Ashley, we ain't got no time for an
Right,
academy,
right.
we ain't got enough people for an academy," so I hear that, but we also have to acknowledge that when we're just throwing people from nothing into this huge something, there is a level of, "I need time to acclimate," that I'm not getting, right, if I'm just
Right,
throwing them right into it.
right. Yeah, and like I said, I started at Bell County Communications. I was there for a year, and they did have an academy, and there were only 3 of us, but it was structured, and I'm used to structure coming from the military, and
Mhm.
so when I got the opportunity to be a part of this program, I knew that I wanted it to be structured in the sense of how we train our new hires anyways, kind of step by step. When they progress through these steps, that lets us know that they have that understanding, and then we go into licensing, and then we go into TCIC certifications. So, I think it's starting to grow. We're starting to get the word out that the academy does work. Like I said, it's still foreign, but hopefully, if we continue to produce good dispatchers and they get into these agencies and do well, that I'm hoping my goal is to have all of Harris County and Fort Bend, Fort Bend County, I'm sorry, join and assist us with improving the academy and allowing it to grow some more.
That's amazing. And for those who are listening and going, "Oh my gosh, I would love to do this at our local community college." Well, how did that process work for you folks creating this, this setup at the community college?
Yeah, so I didn't know it was something that could possibly happen. I was forwarded a job application basically showing what the program was. And I guess they had thought about Houston Community College had thought about doing this some many years ago, but there was no one to really kind of take up the project and continue forward with it. What the school did was they took their college class list to see into public safety. What kind of classes could we kind of add to make it a little more attractive too, as far as a continuing education course? There were 5 classes that could translate that were more on the dispatcher side versus police, fire, and EMS, because HCC does have a police academy, a fire academy, and an EMS academy. So they took those 5 classes and decided they wanted to build upon that to make some kind of academy, because there was word around the community that there were a lot of people interested in dispatching but didn't know what route to take. There was also a lot of word in the community that a lot of people were having a hard time getting jobs with no experience. So the hire beings, they got together. They hired 7 of us. There were originally 7 of us to come together to get the program up and going. The 5 classes that they offer for continuing education, they do get 5 credits, not 5 credits, I'm sorry, about 15 credits for their classes, but they go through this academy just like it's a police academy. Luckily, we do have all those academies, so I was able to get with our police academy director and our fire director, and we kind of worked out a timeline of how this would work out. And I got full support from my higher ups as far as how I wanted to program this program, basically
Mhm.
set it up to where I felt like it would flow. And then, of course, I asked everyone else that was working with me, because we all did this, we all had a part. How can we start to perfect this program so that it would be beneficial to the workforce? And
Mhm.
it took some work. And our first academy wasn't the best, but I feel like it was growing pains. But
Mhm.
we have successfully gotten better as we've gone. And so our fourth and fifth academies, as new instructors, we can kind of look at our students and pay attention to see, oh, are they getting it or not? And I'm really confident about the 13 students that I have between our two academies now.
That's freaking I mean,
Mhm.
that's 13 potential,
Mhm.
folks entering our centers where we're short-staffed. I mean, with knowledge, right? Like, with
Mhm.
some with some foundation where they could actually hopefully be successful in this process. One of the things that I talk about often, in some of these sessions I do at these conferences is, the idea behind our pre-employment test and how they're
Mhm.
pass fail and how that's kind of a disservice to
Mhm.
us. Um, and that we're expecting someone with no knowledge of
Right,
what
right.
we do in this test that isn't really reflective of the actual job, and we're letting that determine who we decide to train. Um,
Mhm.
but with this situation with your community college folks, they're actually getting some knowledge and going into these situations prepared, equipped, and that's like what
Mhm.
our resources do or attempt to do, I should say, at the Raspy Dispatcher is just give a little bit of that knowledge to decrease some of that anxiety so
Right.
we can successfully get through this application process. And you're doing that times 1,000.
I'm trying,
Yeah,
trying.
I mean, you guys are doing it, and I love the fact that you guys are like, our first one, need a little work.
Mm. Oh, it needed a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. I won't live that one down. But
Yeah.
I took the first academy, um, and I took notes every day of the class as far as what I liked and what I didn't like, as far as how we were putting the material on and what we were doing. And then I took that and with our second academy, so our first academy, to be completely transparent, we only had a 20% first time pass rate. We had 5 students. One passed her state licensing exam the first time, and then our second student came back and passed the second time. So we only had 2 out of that first academy of 5 come out with their licenses. So initially it was like, "Oh, what did I do wrong? Like,
Yeah.
how do I make this better?" But then I had to think like this was brand new for us. Let me take everything that I took as far as notes and implement changes I felt were necessary for the second academy. So our
Mhm.
first academy was 8 weeks long. We had a whole bunch of material. They didn't really get on the simulators. Like it was just thrown, just lecture, lecture, lecture.
Yeah.
So for the second academy, I was able to get the academy approved for 10 weeks. I was able to make the syllabus to where certain lessons that I felt were more important, radio communications, things like that, were on its own day. And then we would have lab after for the entire 5. So we have 5-hour classes where the
Mhm.
5-hour class would be a lab for that particular topic, and then we just kind of moved on from there. And then with that syllabus, I also added in like agency tours so they can see for themselves
Wow.
what it is that they're learning. So these academies, they have 3 scheduled. They've already completed 2. So we just started adding in things that we thought, what would we have wanted if we were brand new coming to Dispatcher Academy, knowing what we know now. And so that 10-week course, with the changes that I made, that academy was 100% pass rate. We only had 4
Wow.
students, but all 4 of them passed. And so we've just been
Yeah.
kind of building on top of that. And, with every academy, the next academy was 3 students, 2 of 3 got licensed, and then now we're on our 4th and 5th. So I'm hoping all 13.
Well, I mean, you just look at the jumps in those numbers of
Mhm.
participants, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're taking them to these centers, I mean, these are potentially their future employers they're
Right.
walking
Right.
around and hanging out in and seeing. I mean, we talk often about the value of a sit along. So
Mhm.
that they're able to tour these centers as well is amazing.
Yes. We definitely had in those agency tours just because they so they can see what they're learning. They learn what the PSAP is, what the SAP is, and now they get to go stand in a PSAP and SAP and understand the roles and duties by visually seeing it. So I think that's been a big help as far as making sure that they retain some of the information that they're learning.
Mhm, mhm. And in your experience, obviously you have experience in dispatch
Mhm.
and dealing with students in this academy setting. What is the most important skills or knowledge areas that these new dispatchers need to have in order to succeed?
Hmm, good question. Um, So I think in order for a student to be able to succeed, this is something that they actually have to want to do. It can't be a job that they're just looking because, oh, it's a class that's offered at the academy and eventually I can go work somewhere and get paid. I think you have to have a passion to want to help people in this type of a setting. I think dispatching is universal and can be taught to anybody as long as they are willing to learn. So I think I guess the biggest quality that a student could have is just to be open-minded and understand that we do have a lot of information to give, but the importance of what we're teaching them will take them a long way. I don't think there are a lot of things that I believe will have to be taught that a lot of people don't come to the academy with or just don't come to dispatching with. Multitasking is a learned skill, typing is a learned skill, radio ear, all of that to me is a learned skill with repetitive practice. So I think just having an open mind and being ready to come and learn and train and understand what the job actually is versus what they see on TV, as long as they're able to do that, then they'll be successful.
Awesome. And I mean, you're kind of in a way um, adding a layer of standardized training
Mhm.
to your guys' area that's kind of outside the department's specific training because
Mhm.
as we know, every department does this thing just a little differently.
Right.
they,
And we,
they
we
speak a
definitely
little
tell
different
everyone.
language. What's priority for one is not really a priority for, I mean, it's just wild out here. So
Mhm.
the idea that you guys are kind of standardizing some foundational training for
Mhm.
these aspiring dispatchers, what has that been like for you? And how important is that kind of for dispatching as a whole?
Oh, I love it. So I come from the military, like I said, and I'm just used to not saying the military is just 100% great and organized because they're definitely not, but I come from a generally organized background. So when it comes to standardized training, I feel like I said, dispatching to me is universal. If you can dispatch here, you can dispatch there. Because you know the basics. We know that when we take calls everywhere, the first thing we're asking is for location. Then depending on agency protocols, we teach location, name, and phone number, and we tell them why. For me, location, of course, is always first because how do we know where we're going?
Mhm,
Name is important to me because I'd rather be able to address the hysterical caller by their name versus yelling, sir or ma'am, so I kind of try to get that instilled in them. And a lot of agencies, that's protocol as well. And then,
mhm,
like phone number, if the phone disconnects, yeah, we have the number, but what are ways that, what are reasons why that number that comes up on your Annie screen could be incorrect? So those aspects are standard at all agencies, regardless of how different agencies do things. So, what we
mhm,
tell our students is we're teaching you the basics of the job, the basics of dispatching, the parts that are universal that can transfer anywhere. But remember, when you get to your specific agencies, things may be done a little different, and you will follow your training based off your agency's protocols. So we always do instill that in our students, but when it comes to that standardization, I feel like if that student knows when they answer that call, location, name, phone number, tell me exactly what's happening, that's going to kind of stick with them so that when they get to their agency, regardless of agency specific protocol, those
mhm,
main things that you're looking for are already kind of stuck in your brain to where it should be muscle memory. So
mhm, mhm,
standardization, I think, is really important because, like I said, those initial things that we do as dispatchers that are universal, they happen at all agencies. And to have that foundation, it'll make learning the agency specific protocols, I think, that much easier.
mhm, mhm. And it's true because one
Mhm.
of the things I remember in my academy, they said like day one was like, once you learn how to dispatch, you can do
Mhm.
anything. Was really what they said. If you can do this job, you can do anything. It translates across the board.
Mhm.
Um, you could really kind of drop in and figure something out in any type of crisis. And I think it's
Right,
true. I think once you're drilled into knowing how to respond in this way, it really does translate into a lot of helpful skills and abilities.
right. I agree 100%.
So, how do folks who are interested in, joining your guys' program and getting involved in your guys' area find you and learn more about you?
Oh, so, to find the program, like I said, I try to do a lot of, events, I guess we would call it. So, like, if there are career fairs, just holiday fairs, open houses, I try to visit is the ones that I am aware of. I also depend a lot on word of mouth as well. We are located on our Houston Community College website as under public safety. We are a program that they are putting out there so that we can start to get enrollment. Um, then there is a mandatory orientation as far as what students need to do as far as enrollment, because we don't just accept everybody. We are licensed, so we do have to follow certain guidelines. But my contact information is on the Houston Community College website. I do also have a flyer. I don't remember if I sent it to you or not, but you can contact me through email. My email would be jessica.snead, SNEAD, at hccs.edu. You can also call me at 254-371-0928. I'll tell you that email and text is the quickest way to get a response, but I do respond to everything. Um, and yeah, I'm the point of contact for the program. So any questions you may have, I'd be more than happy to help. I also will take questions. I think the program is needed, and it's not something that's just secluded to just us at Houston Community College. If anyone is interested, I'm more than happy to help with suggesting things or letting you know how we were able to get up and running. Like, I think the academy is something that's needed nationwide,
Mm.
just for that standardized training and being able to transition into the workforce.
Heck yeah. And we're going to include all that information in the description of this video or this episode as well. So don't feel like you need to rush to write it down. We're going to include all the links and all the information to get folks connected with you. And we'll put that flyer out as well because this is an amazing program. Giving one of the things that I love about dispatching is that you don't need like higher ed, right? Like
Mhm.
it's entry level. You don't need a bachelor's to go get into this line of work. But it hasn't been an option for folks who just want to get some training and
Mhm.
some certification going into these application process. A lot of people ask me like, what experience do I need? And like the bare minimum is like, none, we'll train you, come.
Right. Right. But then the flip side is a lot of agencies now are also looking for those with experience. So it's
Mhm.
like,
Yeah,
um,
how do
either
we
you
get
have or you
dispatch
don't. Yeah.
experience?
So,
Like, where that at? Where they hand that out?
right. Draw the look, right?
Exactly. So this is just such an awesome opportunity that you're putting forth for the community, and you're ultimately, supplying the community with more
Mhm.
folks to answer their calls for help. And it's an amazing thing you folks are doing out there.
Oh,
Sincerely.
thank you. Thank you.
Well, one of the questions that I always ask everybody who comes onto the show is what advice would you give someone who is considering a career in dispatch?
What advice would I give to somebody? Same thing I tell my students, be open-minded to the possibilities of the ranges of type of calls that you would receive, the ranges of situations you may be put in, and just be ready to learn. Because I tell the students, um, after 9 years in, I'm still learning. I still ask questions all the time. Don't think that you're going to master dispatching 100% immediately. I think this job is something that you always learn from, and if you're not learning, then you're not growing. So open-minded and be ready to learn.
Amazing. Well, Jessica, again, sincerely, thank you so much for
Thank
coming onto
you.
the show, telling us about your experience and this awesome program you guys have at Houston
Mhm.
Community College.
Well, thank you for having me. This is the second time, but we're not telling anybody that.
That we went Oh man. But genuinely, guys, if you're listening, check out the Houston Community College program. Again, their website's going to be included in the description of this episode. And if you're interested in learning how they're doing it, their syllabus, the program setup, like Jessica said, the steps to creating this program, because we need more of these programs across the nation. So definitely reach out to Jessica if you have those questions as well.
Yes. Come with the questions. I love them.
All right, Jessica, I'll be right back with you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch, the second college course that we featured on this podcast in this last month, really, talking to folks who are educating our future 911 dispatchers. I said it in a post for an upcoming episode that one of the reasons the Raspy Dispatcher was created was because I went through my undergrad and graduate degrees in law enforcement, in administration of justice, and we never talked about dispatch. And when I became a 911 dispatcher, that was really annoying. So I created this platform, and hearing that there are programs that are specifically dedicated to dispatchers, not just a segment of the syllabus broken off for dispatch, but a whole program committed to the education and creating more dispatchers is amazing, and we need more of it. So definitely hit up Jessica if you have any questions. Her contact information will be in this episode. And until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.